Live streaming is on.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, June 25th. I think I looked at that first.
24th. Sorry.
I did look at it first, and then I forgot already. Okay, June 24th, 2020. My name is Marc Sabatella. This is my regular weekly series of chats about MuseScore and music making, the MuseScore Cafe, and pick some topic to talk about and talk about it for a while and take questions and whatnot. So the topic for today, as I've announced, is I've been going through every week and interviewing the different students who are participating in the Google Summer of Code program. And so for people who haven't been watching before, let me just give a brief summary of what this is. Google, every year for the last, 15 years or so, has sponsored this program they call Google Summer of Code, where they pay college students, like a kind of a summer program, obviously Summer of Code, to work on open source software. So they partner with open source software organizations like MuseScore, which has participated in this like many of those years, and they pair up a student with a mentor, someone who's a regular developer on the project, and Google then basically pays that student to work on it under the advisement of the mentor and other members of the community. And there's this whole process, this whole application process, and submitting proposals and getting selected. And it's kind of it's become a very big deal, and it's a really wonderful event. Yeah, as I said, we participated in it several, like maybe 10 times or so, and I've mentored for it at least half a dozen times, I think. And so we have 3 students this year. You met the first time Café, who is implementing some internal data structure stuff that's going to help us improve some things regarding a lot of things, including keyboard navigation for accessibility and just generally how we represent the score. And then you met Sergios, who was working on the albums feature. So today we're going to meet Isaac, who is working on a couple of sort of related things: multi-measure rests and multi-measure repeats. So multi-measure rests are things that we've long had, but they've been pretty inflexible as far as how they get displayed, and you're going to get to see some of the new stuff. You'll get to see some of the new stuff he's been working on, and then talk about what is to come regarding things like 2 and 4 bar repeats. Now, Isaac, unlike the other students that have traditionally been involved in this program, is not a newcomer to MuseScore. He's been involved for quite some time, back from his days in high school, even. So I'm going to turn things over now to Isaac to kind of introduce himself, talk about how he got involved with MuseScore, and then we'll talk a little more about his how he got involved in the Summer of Code and the project. So welcome, Isaac.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. So yeah, me and MuseScore go way back. I grew up in a homeschooling family, so tons of free time to pursue various interests, and one of my interests being music. Actually, my dad found MuseScore for me because I wasn't old enough to have unfiltered internet. He found he found Finale Notepad 2009, which was pretty terrible because they deliberately hamstring it so that you'll buy the full version. They only give you like up to 6 instruments in a score and stuff. So but then he found MuseScore, which was version 1, and that was like 10 years ago. So I've been a user for a very long time. And then as you know, the process is people come for the software and then stay for the community. I started engaging on the forums when the 2.0 development period was ongoing. Like I had some complaints about the beta for that version. And pretty much MuseScore is where I first connected with computer science, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I had no thoughts of possibly pursuing programming until I started watching some of the open source stuff going on GitHub. And I took a class at community college. And now I have a minor in computer science. I'm studying music education at Wayne State University in Detroit. That's my major, but my minor is computer science. And I'm just so happy to be doing Summer of Code. It's been a goal of mine for years.
Yeah, and we're just really, really happy to have you on here because you've done a number of really nice things for the community over the past few years, and submitted a couple bug fixes and things like that lately as you were gearing up for this, and we're really looking forward to this first kind of major contribution here. I do. I'll pull up. Except I don't have it handy. The score, this getting started score that you had made.
Oh yeah.
So I'll get that up while you go back to talking about your project. So yeah, the process for people who don't know is that this whole process where lots of people might want to be chosen to participate in this Google Summer of Code. And so you apply to an organization, like you apply to MuseScore, and we get dozens of people applying every year usually. And we have a list of ideas that like we say, well, if you don't know anything about MuseScore and you don't have any better ideas, here are some things that maybe you could submit for a proposal. Every year, most of the proposals are just one of those ideas. And it always disappoints me a little bit because I'd really love to see people come in with like some idea of their own of this is something that we want to do. And I think, Isaac, your project may have been on the idea list, but if so, it was maybe because you put it there.
I actually can't remember that.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it definitely is partially scratching my own itch thing. Again, to use one of your favorite phrases.
Yes, that is the open source phrase.
Yeah, because I regard some of these things I'm implementing as noticeable gaps in MuseScore's functionality, things that could make people go like, well, I use this other score writer, and why should I use MuseScore? Because it can't even do this, that, the other thing. So I'm filling in the gaps that I've felt, even if they're not going to be super important to that many people. It's important to me that these be within MuseScore's capabilities.
Yeah, and we definitely love that. That is how I got involved also. When I started using MuseScore, I was like, wow, it does almost everything I need except for these couple things involving chord symbols. So I did that. And then it was like, well, except for this other thing, and did that. And oh, well, except for, and eventually, I have my hands kind of all over the code, as you've probably noticed. We got however many proposals we got. I don't remember this time, but like I said, it's usually like some number of dozens. And we sort of narrow it down to which ones we think, both between the proposal itself and the person submitting, it felt like, okay, this feels like it's a project worth doing, and we think that this person is capable of doing that project based on their proposal. And we were really happy that we chose you and that you're involved in doing this. So yeah, start talking a little more about your project. Feel free to like start demoing and do all that.
Sure. Okay. So the name of my proposal was Repeats, Rests, and Other Counting Related Symbols. So these are kind of loosely related areas of engraving. I'll go through and demo, I guess, what I've accomplished so far, and then I'll talk about the next phase. So let me share my screen. Okay, sharing.
It is not coming through. Yes, you're on.
All right. So I'm launching my development build here. So I spent the first few weeks of the Summer of Code on multi-measure rests, which I think were probably the easiest thing to start with. That's why I put them first, because I'm only working with the visual appearance and not the semantic underlying stuff at all. So, I have this nice test score actually. Okay, so here you see a number of multi-measure rests in the sort of standard appearance that MuseScore had. Actually, no, that's not quite true. These are actually already slightly better.
The bars.
Yeah, I'm going to open MuseScore 3 real quick just to demonstrate this. There's a small error in the way MuseScore 3 renders multi-measure rests. Very tiny. You have to look very closely to see it, but this bar is going a little too tall. It's supposed to only go from this line to this line, and it goes a little bit further.
Yep.
And I have it fixed up so you can see it's exactly accurate.
Nice.
Yeah. So,
by the way, when I said that, one of my my first involvements after chord, well, one of the very first things I did after chord symbols was similar little small details that were bugging me.
So, I guess since I first talked about the height of that vertical stroke, we'll start there. So I added a new page to the style dialog, containing all the multi-measure rest options, some of which have already existed and some of which I've newly implemented. Okay. So one of them is the vertical stroke height. So you can increase that, and they go like that. I don't know why anybody would want that, but you know, you can also make it smaller, whatever your stylistic preference is, whatever your idea of beauty, I guess. You can also make them thicker. You can make some pretty ugly things if you want. The horizontal stroke, you can make that thicker. Actually, you can take it up to a maximum of the height of the staff. And let's see, you can also take away the vertical strokes. This can go all the way to the width of the measure as well. So again, I can't imagine why somebody would want this, but modern engraving, people do all kinds of crazy notation.
Well, I can totally imagine someone doing that as some sort of hack way of accomplishing something else entirely. Like, oh, these aren't really multi-measure rests. I just want a solid black thing in my store.
And yeah, exactly. And related to that, I added an option to disable the number for any individual multi-measure rest. So yeah, then you've just got a black box. So let me reset all these things.
Now, you didn't talk about the vertical position and number yet.
That's what I'm coming to next. So
Okay.
speaking of the multi-measure rest number, you might want to put that, say, down there, or right in the middle, or underneath. And if you have it right in the middle, I put by default the horizontal bar will break into two segments around the number. But if for some reason you want to draw it straight through, you can do that too. And yeah, so that's it. That's it for the what I'm calling the H bars, because it's shaped like a letter H. But then we also have the old style of multi-measure rest.
And before you go on to that, I want to point out for people watching, I see someone on the chat has mentioned they're looking forward to MuseScore 3.5. I should mention that most of the work that's being done for Google Summer of Code is targeted for MuseScore 4, which is some semi-distant future. But that vertical height of the number is in MuseScore 3.5.
Yes, it is, because I did that one before my project proposal was even accepted, just to sort of prove to myself that I could.
And that's an important part of the process. That's how we know that people are going to be able to do what they say they're going to do, is they do some bug fixes or implement some new features. They do some things that sort of prove, yes, I understand the code. I know what I'm doing here. Mm-hmm.
So the old style of multi-measure rest, basically, instead of showing a one-size-fits-all shape of a horizontal line with the two strokes, the H, it shows you a composite symbol of rest durations. So this 4-measure symbol here, here's a 4-measure plus a 1-measure, 4-measure plus 2 measures. Thought I had a 7-measure one somewhere. Well, there's 8 measures. I'll just add bars to the end. So that's what the 7-measure rest looks like. 4 plus 2 plus 1. And then conventionally, these are only used up to a limit of 9, 4 plus 4 plus 1. And then after that, they go to the H bar. But some people might want to change that. I'm trying to show these both at the same time. So you can increase this number. Say we take it way up high. Then now any number up to 29 will get displayed with old style symbols, and after that goes to the H bar. So this is a sort of a historical style that is not commonly used much in like the past 50 years or so, but I think it's pretty cool. And if you want to make an edition of an old piece, you might want to follow the old classical engraving style.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks great.
So that's it for multi-measure rests. That stage of the project is basically done this week. So for what I'm doing next, I think I might just first show you some mock-ups.
Yeah, and so when Isaac says this is done, I mean, that code is there. It's not necessarily like already merged into MuseScore 4, but it's like we've reviewed it. It all looks good. It's all working.
Mm-hmm. Although you've raised some salient points. About,
there's always things that will say, oh, could you like fix this and tweak this? And...
Yeah. Okay, so I'm actually looking for my initial blog post.
Well, I've got your blog in the chat window here, but you want to see? Oh, I see your initial blog post from 4 years ago.
No, I've got what I'm looking for.
Okay.
I'll turn the screen sharing back on real quick. So this right here is a notation that MuseScore currently does not support. So I'm planning on implementing that. The funny gray thing here, I've already got that working, which I'll show you in a moment. Nice. The 4-measure repeat, the same thing. I'm planning on implementing this style here with like extenders to make it more clear where one starts and the other begins, because with this version, with the entirely empty measures, it's a little hard to understand. And then I'm also going to add automatic numbering for single measure repeats. MuseScore already does have these single measure repeats, but if you want to add numbers to them, you have to like add them manually. I'm planning on adding a style setting or a couple of style settings. You can have either automatically number every single one or number them at intervals with or without parentheses. That's probably going to occupy the rest of this period. It's going to be much more complicated than the multi-measure rest stuff, because basically now this requires real work. Everything so far, it's just been a walk in the park.
Well, that's I would say you've done really good work, because it's not easy to deal with some of the things that you've done, including basically creating a new data structure for the multi-measure rest. So I'm not saying there's not going to be challenges ahead, but I think you might be pleasantly surprised that you've learned enough to be to overcome them pretty well, is what I think.
Well, I hope so. That's why I sequenced this project schedule the way I did.
Yeah, I think that was
first, and then take the experience to the harder stuff.
Yeah. By the way, I'm going to share my screen for a second, just because then I can show the getting started score. People who started with MuseScore 2 probably saw this back in the day, but do we have screen share? Yes, it says it is. I'm going to take its word for it. So this was the getting started score, the very oldest version of it I could find, although it's not really from 2018. It's older than that.
It's actually, if you look on MuseScore.com/Isaac Weiss, you'll find it. Actually, it's literally /Isaac Weiss /getting started, if I'm not mistaken.
Isaac Weiss. Getting started, all one word?
I believe so.
Oh,
or maybe it's got a hyphen, getting hyphen started.
Yeah, that's guess. That's right, because they like hyphens. So there we go. There's the original version from back in 2015.
Warms my heart.
Yeah. So so it basically was a tutorial that you could load from within MuseScore, and it would give you show you a sample thing, and then give you some practice entering it. So anyhow, that was one of the first involvements that I remember you having. Also, I think some maybe concert band templates or something like that, perhaps.
Back when I knew nothing about programming, and that was the only way I could contribute.
Yeah, and that was great, and that was again same story for me when I knew programming, but it was I'm not going to go back into that life. That was an old life. That's whatever. Okay, so yeah, but so you showed that group element thing, and I know about the don't break element that this is designed to replace, but the whole idea of how you're looking at replacing it is kind of new to me. So I'm looking forward to you talking a little more about what that was about.
Sure. So I'm sharing screen again here. So the concept is, I'm just going to delete all this stuff. Delete those line breaks. Okay. So for a 2-measure repeat, it's going to be, the symbol is going to be centered on the bar line between 2 measures. And you really don't want that to get stuck, say, this measure and this measure, and then it's hanging off the edge here. Actually, to make the measures clear, I'm going to just add numbers to every measure.
Yeah.
Okay. So if the 2-measure repeat covers 18 and 19, you don't want to see this happen. So to prevent that, you want a way to force measure 18 and 19 to always stay in a group. And there was some code sort of hidden in the code base, which was partially implemented back during the 3.0 development phase, and then removed because it wasn't working right. I re-enabled it, fixed the thing that wasn't working right, and added some new functionality. So it's right here in the breaks and spacers. I have the version here where it's called Don't Break. I renamed it to Group Measures.
Yeah.
Oh, well. So if we put this thing on measure 18, it will group it with measure 19, and they stay together right here. Apparently, I have something I need to fix.
Apparently, the measure numbers aren't right.
That's fine. New bugs are always being found and squashed. That's the way this thing goes.
Yeah.
I'll make a mental note of that. Because I never thought of showing measure numbers in every measure before.
Yeah.
I was lucky I thought of that. Okay. So this functions as a toggle. You can click to add it and click to remove it. You can also select, say, 2 measures, and then it will group those 2 together. And what's new that I've added, the original implementation worked for only 2 measures consecutively. If you added any additional ones, they were ignored. I've got it for as many measures as you like. Well, not quite. I'll get to that. Say measures 15 through 26, all grouped together, and they'll stay on the same system.
Nice.
So this will be useful to people for basically general formatting, same as the line breaks and page breaks. They want to group measures even without a 2-measure, 4-measure repeat. This will be available to them.
Yeah. That looks
what
nice.
I do not have working is if you want to select more measures than will actually fit together. So sure, you can group all these easy, but what if you want to group one more with them? What I think I might want to try to do, and that's what I'll spend this week on, is actually forcibly compress them to stay together. If I can't figure that out by the end of the week, then I'll just leave it and move on.
For what it's worth, I'll recommend you don't spend a lot of time on that because we're looking at some other changes having to do with that kind of stuff, and we might want to kind of consider all that together, but we can talk about that offline.
Okay. Well, alternatively, I just want to improve on, I'll show you. So one measure that can't fit in gets put on its own system. If we're trying to group even more measures, every additional one that doesn't fit with the group gets its own system. So that's not ideal.
Right.
I had to basically do that in order to prevent crashes, and I haven't found anything else that doesn't crash yet. But ideally, I think it should split into two groups. These would be in a group, and these would be in a group. But if that just doesn't work if they're all grouped together. Oh, and one more thing regarding, oops, that happens sometimes. It's the way these things are. So if you have a mixed selection, range selection containing some measures that are grouped and some measures that are not, my idea, what I have implemented is that instead of toggling, like say, okay, I have to remove the palettes and re-display them because they don't display the first time usually. That's not my fault. So if you have some measures that are grouped in, there's a pair of measures here, a pair of measures here, and a pair of measures here, and you select a range that includes them, this will add and not remove. It will only remove if everything in the selection is already grouped.
Yeah, I was sort of wondering about that when you tried adding ones before, and when I saw it work that way, I'm like, oh, I guess that's what it does.
Yep. So it will add unless they're saturated, basically. I put the variable in the code called all no breaks, and if all no breaks is true, then it will remove. Otherwise, it will add.
Nice.
And that is the extent of what I have currently accomplished. Oh, nope, I forgot one thing. Let me remove these and go back to the multi-measure rests. If you choose to change your musical font,
Oh, yeah.
yep, because let's be honest, these newly implemented options are not going to be used that often. Not that many people are going to go hunting for them and say, oh, I want to make these thicker, whatever. But they should still be useful because if you change your font, then the style automatically changes. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
That's what makes it actually likely to be of use to the average user.
And for what it's worth, the idea of supporting additional fonts is currently being discussed. Bravura is one that, is an open source one that we've, brought in from outside. But there's other fonts, open source fonts that we would have the ability to support. There's a question about maybe changing the default font in the future and which would be the best choice and so forth. So
I'm a very strong advocate for Cadence.
And I was not even familiar with that one, so I'm just starting to look at it and go, oh yeah, that does look nice. But yeah, the idea that we want to support additional fonts and that when you change fonts, that certain settings should be changed. So I should mention also that there is built-in, there's a standard, it's called SMOOFL, standard metadata, I don't remember what it all stands for, but it's the standard for what music fonts should look like, and it was produced by the Dorico people so that they could have access to additional fonts when they were a new program, basically. And they said, hey, let's all build fonts around this new standard. And now all the major notation programs have kind of rallied around it, and we're all using the same standard font format, which is great. And it means that certain fonts like Bravura are available on multiple programs. And they have their own scheme for how to, like when you change fonts to say, oh, when you use this font, use these style settings. But there wasn't anything about multi-measure rests in there. So one of the things that Isaac just did this morning, last night, was log a request to the people who maintain the SMUFL standard to say, please add this setting so that it becomes possible to automatically change the thickness of multi-measure rest when you change fonts. He's implemented that using a way that doesn't use what's built into the font system, but now this is an example of now interacting, like this was probably your first time, or was it? I don't know, going over to the SMUFL site and submitting anything to them too.
Yeah, and well, it was a continuation of, I researched on their website when I was first investigating whether, well, because we already do have this system where if you change the font, then it will make the bar lines thicker or thinner. It will change how slurs are displayed and all this stuff. So I wanted to take advantage of the same thing for multi-measure rests. And I found that there's this metadata.json file that comes with each font, and it contains various parameters, and that's not one of them. And then I was looking on the SMUFL website to see if it turns out there's a very strictly defined list of keys pairs. So I didn't want to mess with the third-party metadata file.
Yeah, no, and you shouldn't, but it's good now because now you're interacting with them also, and that's all part of what Google Summer of Code is sponsoring, is people learning more about the whole open source world and everyone helping each other out in these ways. That's kind of what this is about. There is a question from the chat that actually from Marcus. This was one that occurred to me during your very last little bit of demonstration there, and that is our grouped measures. How do they interact with them with the multi-measure rests? So
at the moment, they basically ignore them. Here I have a multi-measure. There's a break multi-measure rest in here.
Your screen share is off.
Oh, thank you for reminding me of that. Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, normally you wouldn't be grouping empty measures. The whole point of the grouping is because there's something important on them you want to keep together. But I could also imagine that not necessarily being true for all parts. Like maybe in a score, there might be in the violin part important to keep these measures together, and in the oboe part, not so much. So that's something you might need to be thinking about at some point.
Yeah, well, they don't propagate to parts.
Good.
Just like line breaks.
Yes.
By the way, this is the example score for the bug I mentioned. This is from issue number whatever.
Okay.
With the one don't break there. This is actually your file that you uploaded.
I see. This is the one I submitted when I submitted that bug.
And now it works correctly. Both measures together jump to the next system, and this is stretched out to the end of the system.
But as far as multi-measure rests?
Yes. Okay. So basically, they will go where there is a distinct bar line, but they don't affect the underlying measures currently.
So right now, what if you?
Oh no, wait. Maybe I'm misremembering. No, these were already there.
Okay. So, but that also shows that if they're there, just because they're grouped, it doesn't exclude them. Which makes sense.
It doesn't touch the underlying measures, basically. Oh, it does. Nope. Okay, I misremembered that. I was playing around with this the other day, and I forgot which version I implemented, I guess.
Gotcha. Well, this is all the kind of stuff that as it's implemented and we get to start playing with it in nightly builds and so forth, it's never expected that the very first time this makes it into, because what happens is as you're developing, for people who don't know, we develop these features, we implement them, we test them, and then when we feel like they're ready, they get put into what's called a nightly build. And that means it's part of what will be some future release. And so these nightly builds are available for anyone to test. And there's always a handful of people testing nightly builds. And so there's already nightly builds for what's eventually going to be MuseScore 4. So sooner or later, the stuff that Isaac is working on will be part of nightly builds, and then we'll start getting feedback from a handful of users, and we'll start hearing people saying, well, actually, I used it in this situation with multi-measure rests and the grouping, and I was actually expecting this for this reason, and then we'll get to really see how people use this stuff in the real world, and then we can refine it further. So that's all a part of the process.
I will say that the multi-measure rests, the style options and old style stuff, those are ready as
Yep.
far as I know to go into the nightly builds. And that would
I
also
believe
make
they
it
are.
easier for the future development, which would then be not making conflicts in the code files.
Right.
So,
And there's people, I haven't talked, and I should do a cafe talking about MuseScore 4, except I don't know really much more than anyone else does. There's been a public announcement about the kind of planned direction for MuseScore 4. Yeah, so we've talked about, we, meaning the MuseScore development team, has put forth this thing saying that we're going to work on some stuff having to do with a lot of audio related things, a lot of playback related things, but a lot of just user interface related things. And so there's a lot of things that we're looking at improving. It's a pretty big project as far as that goes. And so, yeah, I should spend a whole cafe on it once I have my brain wrapped around it a little more, what all we're looking at doing, because it is quite a lot. So anyhow, yeah, the stuff with the multi-measure rest is ready to be part of a nightly build. It just needs to be merged. Right now, we're still really focused on getting MuseScore 3.5 ready. We'll probably have a release candidate for it within the next couple of days. I see that the setup for it was just done within the last hour or so. So yeah, I would expect to see this release candidate for 3.5 pretty soon.
Yeah.
And
so yeah, Eagle-eyed, sorry.
Oh,
I was going to say, eagle-eyed users may have noticed earlier when I was showing the inspector option to disable the number that this inspector looks totally different.
Right.
So that's an example of how MuseScore 4 is going to be. So far, they've upgraded the inspector. They're going to be doing everything. It's going to look different.
Yes, and probably people maybe have saw a little bits of that during Party K's session and Sergio's session, although more it was just focused on their own specific things, and it wasn't a little clear how it fit into the big picture. With your multi-measure rest, it's a little more obvious how that setting fits into the rest of the inspector.
Although, unfortunately, currently the inspector is not hooked up to the style. You can't, in MuseScore 3, if you, say, adjust the number position on a single multi-measure rest, there's a button in the inspector to set that as the style score wide, and that's missing in the MuseScore 4 inspector right now.
Right, and I'm hoping to see that back because I really like that feature.
Me too.
Also, one of the things that doesn't seem to be working in the inspector are the spin boxes. As far as I can tell, either that or just some of these things are just read-only.
They don't react to the arrow keys, but you can type or click. That's my experience.
I see. Okay. I just tried the arrow keys. No, I tried clicking on the arrows, and that didn't seem to work either.
Oh, not that either. Okay. You have to
that's what I thought, but what do I know? Maybe I misremembered it. Okay, so that is basically what's going on. So that group measure feature, the reason that's important is, like you said, to keep those multi-measure repeats from hanging off the end. But then the rest of what you're going to be doing is actually making those multi-measure repeats work for playback, right? Because right now those symbols exist. You can already add them today to your score. You can add them from the symbol palette.
You can add them, but they won't even land in the right spot.
No. I'm not saying it's good. So you can attach it to the bar line and then move it directly onto the bar line fairly easily, but it won't play back, and there will be no guarantee that those measures will stay on the same line. So getting them to stay on the same line is step one. Getting the symbol to land in the right spot is step two, and then step three is actually getting it to play back right. I don't know if that's the actual order you're going to do them in, but the playback part is probably the more challenging part as far as when you're going to have to figure out some new stuff, I imagine.
That may actually be the second most challenging part, because I also have to figure out how to import and export, and I understand Music XML kind of wants you to show the underlying. Yeah, they want you to basically repeat whatever is being repeated, and somehow also indicate that there's a repeat measure symbol.
And is that how we do it for single measure repeats now?
I do not know.
All right.
This is based on when there was a discussion a while back on the forums about 2 and 4 bar repeats. there's comments in the thread from Eric Fontaine about Music XML, I think.
Okay.
So I know that's going to be a challenge coming up.
All right. Well, if other people watching have any questions, you want to hit me up on the chat. You got a couple minutes to do so before we sign off here. Or if Isaac, you have anything more you need to be telling us or sharing or asking yourself. I put the ball back in your court for a minute here.
I've pretty much, I think I've talked about everything that I'm currently planning coming up, and I've showed everything that I already have accomplished in the past. So, yeah, I'm in a pretty good place, I feel like.
Very cool. I just realized I've been sharing my screen this whole time, and so we've been watching my screen share of everyone. But whatever, it's my screen share is what everyone else is seeing, so it's just been a little window within a window going on. But whatever. All right. Well, then in that case, I'd like to thank you so much for being here and sharing what you've been doing, and thanks for all the great work. And we're really excited to see this stuff coming to fruition.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I can't express how delighted I am to be doing this, and thank you and the rest of the community for having been so welcoming over these years.
Yeah, no, it's been great having you. All right, so everyone, I'm going to sign off here and then be back next week with something else. I don't know. I'll probably come back to talking about something musical, some aspect of composition or something like that, because that's the itch I'm having right now to talk about. So don't know exactly what it'll be. Feel free to drop me some comments and make a suggestion. Sometime coming up, I'm sure I'll talk about MuseScore 4. When MuseScore 3.5 actually releases, I'll do another little broad summary of that. All right, so everyone, oh, wait a minute. It's been mentioned, please reassure. Oh, yes. One question, someone just asking for a reassuring that just because MuseScore 4 is going to be primarily about some like playback related things and user interface things, that we're not going to stop focusing on engraving things. And no, we are not going to stop focusing on that. In fact, we've just in the last few days started thinking about really what that might mean. We've actually hired a professional engraver to advise us on some of these things, and are looking at some possible things that we could maybe sneak into MuseScore 3.5. But although actually there have been some changes, improvements already in 3.5. But yeah, we are definitely looking at making some improvements. Bringing in additional fonts is one of them. But lots of other things that we're looking at to make sure that scores look better and better. And of course, things like what Isaac's been doing here of providing additional control over the appearance of your multi-measure rests. That is just one example of that. So yeah, absolutely, that is something that we will never lose sight of. MuseScore is a notation program. Yes, people use it as a compositional aid, and all those playback features are nice and useful, but the original purpose was to get something on a paper, and that is not going to change. We are not going to sacrifice that just to do other things. I think that is a very fair assumption.
From my perspective, the original tagline, "Create beautiful sheet music," that should still be the lodestone,
yeah,
whatever the word is.
That I like that too, and I think probably it could be maybe expanded to be a little more general and say, well, especially considering that the output device may or may not be a piece of paper, it might be an iPad or something else, and there is more to the process, but it is all about that.
Keyword is beautiful,
yeah,
beautiful music.
Yes. All right. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. Thank you, Isaac, and I will see everyone next time. Okay, I got to remember to hang up on this newfangled thing here. Here we go. All right, see you. Bye.
Bye-bye.